You reach for the blade with your left hand. It feels natural, effortless. The stone fits your palm like it was waiting there for you all along. But around the fire, the others notice. They always notice. Because you are the one who does it differently. For roughly the last 2 million years, this was the quiet reality of being you. The left-handed one. The exception in a world that was gripped, swung, thrown, and carved almost entirely by the right hand. Today, about 1 in 10 people are left-handed. And here's the strange part. That number has barely moved. Across every continent, every culture, every era we can measure, the ratio holds steady. Roughly 9 right hands for everyone like yours. Why? That single question hides one of the oddest stories in human evolution. To understand it, you have to go back, far back. Long before writing, long before farming, to a time when the tools that kept you alive were chipped from stone, and your hands quietly decided whether you ate or starved. So how do we even know ancient humans had a dominant hand at all? The answer comes from a scientist named Nicholas Toth. In the 1980s, Toth studied some of the oldest stone tools on Earth, recovered from a site called Kubifora in Kenya. These tools were made by a process called knapping. Knapping simply means striking one rock against another to flake off sharp edges. Here's the clever part. When you knap a stone, the flakes peel away in a direction that depends on which hand turns the core and which hand strikes it. Toth examined the flakes from tools made more than 1.5 million years ago. The pattern was unmistakable. Our distant ancestors were already, on the whole, right-handed. Let that sink in. Before there were modern humans, before there were words, the right hand was already winning. But Toth was only the beginning. To find the bias in actual bodies, you need to look at teeth. And that brings us to David Freyer, a paleoanthropologist at the University of Kansas. Freyer studied the front teeth of Neanderthals, your thick-browed evolutionary cousins, from sites like Krapina in Croatia. Why teeth? Because Neanderthals used their mouths as a third hand. They would clamp a strip of meat or hide between their front teeth, pull it tight with one hand, and slice it with a stone tool held in the other. Sometimes the blades scraped across the teeth, leaving tiny scratches called striations. Striations are just fine grooves worn into the enamel, and those scratches have a direction. A right-handed slicer leaves marks angled one way. A left-handed slicer leaves them angled the other. When Freyer and his colleagues read these ancient teeth like the rings of a tree, the verdict was overwhelming. Around 9 out of 10 Neanderthals were right-handed, the very same ratio we see today. So the bias is not modern. It is not cultural. It is old, older than our species, stamped into the bone and the stone of our deepest past. Which means, for hundreds of thousands of years, being left-handed made you a true minority, and the world was not built for you. Let's reconstruct a single, ordinary day to feel what that meant. You wake before dawn in a shelter of hide and branch. The fire is low. You reach for your hand axe, the one you shaped yourself, because the ones the others make never sit right in your grip. Their blades are angled for a right palm. Yours is mirrored. A small thing. But you have done it 1,000 times. And 1,000 times you have felt the gap between your body and everyone else's. You join the hunt. The spear throwers around you all step the same way, lead with the same foot, pivot off the same shoulder. You do not. Where they go right, you go left. In the chaos of the chase, you are the one moving against the grain of the group. By the fire that night, someone hands you a tool the wrong way around, and you turn it without thinking, the way you have turned everything your whole life. Now here's where the story turns. Because you might assume that being the odd one out was pure disadvantage, a glitch, a burden. It was not. This is the counterintuitive twist, and it comes from 2 French researchers, Charlotte Fourie and Michel Raymond, at the University of Montpellier. In the early 2000s, they asked a deceptively simple question. If left-handedness is so rare and the world is so clearly built for righties, why did the trait never vanish? Evolution is ruthless. Useless variations get scrubbed out. So why are you still here? Their answer was the fighting hypothesis. Picture hand-to-hand combat, a fist fight, a spear thrust at close range. Nearly everyone you have ever fought has been right-handed. So your instincts, your blocks, your timing are all tuned to expect a right-handed opponent. Then a left-hander steps in. Suddenly every angle is reversed. The blow comes from the unexpected side. For one critical heartbeat, your enemy does not know how to read you. In a world where violence was common and a single fight could end a life, that fraction of a second was everything. Your strangeness was a weapon. Fourier and Raymond tested this in a brilliant way. They looked at traditional societies around the world and compared their rates of violence to their proportion of left-handers. The pattern was striking. In the most peaceful societies, left-handers were rare, sometimes only a few percent. But in the most violent societies, where deadly fights were frequent, the share of left-handers climbed far higher. Do you see what that means? The more dangerous the world, the more valuable your left hand became. Violence itself was protecting the trait, keeping you in the gene pool, generation after generation. This is what biologists call frequency-dependent selection. The phrase sounds complicated, but the idea is simple. Your advantage exists only because you are rare. If everyone were left-handed, the surprise would be gone, the edge would vanish, and you would just be ordinary. Your power comes precisely from being the minority. The moment there were too many of you, you would stop being special. So the very thing that made you the exception around that ancient fire was the thing keeping you alive. There is one more place your ancestors left their mark, and it is achingly beautiful. Go into the painted caves of Europe, places like El Castillo in Spain and Chauvet in France, and you will find them on the walls. Hand stencils, tens of thousands of years old. To make one, a person pressed a hand flat against the rock, took a mouthful of powdered pigment, and blew it through a tube or their lips, spraying color around the fingers. When they pulled the hand away, a perfect silhouette remained, a signature in stone. And look closely at which hand they pressed to the wall. Overwhelmingly, it is the left. Why? Because to do the blowing, the spraying, the precise work, they used their dominant hand, their right, leaving the left pinned to the rock. Even our oldest art whispers the same truth. The right hand worked, the left hand was held still. Unless, of course, you are one of the rare ones, in which case, somewhere on those ancient walls, there may be a right hand pressed flat, left by someone exactly like you. A left-hander signing their name against the dark. So what does any of this have to do with you, right now, reading this? More than you think. The scissors that pinch your fingers, the notebook spiral that digs into your wrist, the can opener, the desk, the guitar, the doorknob your brain has to consciously renegotiate. None of that is in your head. You are living inside a design built by and for the right-handed 9 out of 10, just as your ancestors did at that fire 2 million years ago. The shape of your daily friction is genuinely ancient. But carry this with you too. That same minority status, the thing that makes the world feel slightly out of step, is the exact trait that survived, because it was useful. It was sharpened by danger, preserved by the simple fact of being rare. You are not a glitch. You are the result of an evolutionary bet that paid off, over and over, across hundreds of thousands of years of human struggle. So the next time you reach for something with your left hand, and someone glances up, and you feel for half a second like the one who does it differently, remember what that difference once meant. It meant the world was not built for you, and it meant you were exactly the one it could not afford to lose.